The darkest way to handle disrespect. Machiavelli. In 1503, a young nobleman publicly humiliated Cesare Borgia at a diplomatic gathering, calling him nothing more than his father's puppet. 3 months later, that same nobleman was found dead in his villa, with no trace of violence, no sign of struggle. The only clue? A single playing card left on his desk, the Prince of Cups, turned upside down. This wasn't random. This was Machiavelli's student at work. What you're about to learn today will fundamentally change how you handle disrespect for the rest of your life. But I need to warn you, these methods are so psychologically powerful that they've been used by everyone from Renaissance, princes to modern day, CEOs to completely destroy their enemies, lives without ever laying a finger on them. If you're easily offended, if you believe everyone deserves kindness, or if you think turning the other cheek is always the answer, this video isn't for you. But if you're tired of being walked over, if you're ready to learn the darkest secrets of power that they don't teach in school, then buckle up. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved. And more importantly, you'll know exactly how to make people fear crossing you without them even realizing what you're doing. But first, comment below with the word prince. If you've ever been so disrespected that it changed who you are. I want to know I'm talking to the right people. Before we dive into the brutal tactics, you need to understand who Niccolo Machiavelli really was, and why his methods are so terrifyingly effective. Most people think Machiavelli was just some evil philosopher who told rulers to be cruel. That's completely wrong. Machiavelli was a diplomat, a political theorist, and most importantly, a master observer of human nature who spent his life studying what actually works in the real world, not what should work in a perfect world. He lived through the collapse of the Florentine Republic, witnessed the rise and fall of powerful families, and watched as nice guys finished not just last, but often ended up dead. His book, The Prince, wasn't written to teach evil. It was written to teach survival in a world where being naive gets you destroyed. Now, here's what makes Machiavelli's approach to disrespect so dark and so effective. It's not about immediate revenge. Any fool can punch someone in the face. Machiavelli's methods are about long-term strategic destruction that your enemies will never see coming. Think of it like this. When someone disrespects you publicly, your first instinct is probably to defend yourself immediately, to argue, to fight back emotionally. That's exactly what they expect, and it's exactly what makes you look weak. Machiavelli taught a different way. A way where your enemies destroy themselves while you appear completely innocent. A way where justice is served cold, calculated, and absolute. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. What I'm about to teach you can ruin lives. Use it wisely. If you're ready to learn these dark secrets, hit that like button now. And if you want to master the art of power, subscribe and ring that notification bell, because this is just the beginning of what I'm going to teach you about. Psychological warfare. Chapter 1. The Psychology of Disrespect. Chapter 1. Why understanding the psychology of disrespect is your first weapon. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing executive who came to me after being publicly humiliated by her colleague during a board meeting. This colleague had interrupted her presentation, dismissed her ideas, and even made a joke about her trying too hard to be heard. Everyone laughed. Sarah felt crushed. Her first instinct? Confront him immediately. Email HR, make a scene. I told her to do absolutely nothing. For now. Because here's what Machiavelli understood that most people don't. Disrespect is never really about you. It's about the disrespecter's own insecurity, their need for power, their fear of being exposed as inadequate. When someone disrespects you publicly, they're actually revealing their greatest weakness. They need an audience to feel powerful. This is gold-level intelligence that you can use to destroy them. Let me break down the psychology. First, public disrespect is always a power play. The person isn't trying to hurt your feelings. They're trying to elevate their status by lowering yours. Second, they expect an emotional reaction. They want you to get angry, defensive, or upset because that proves their attack worked. Third, they're counting on social validation. They need others to side with them or at least remain neutral. Now here's where Machiavelli's genius comes in. He realized that if you can control these three elements, you can turn their own attack into their downfall. Back to Sarah. Instead of reacting, we spent 2 weeks studying her colleague. We discovered he had a pattern. He only attacked people he perceived as threats. We found out he was insecure about his lack of formal education. We learned he was desperate for the approval of senior management. Armed with this intelligence, Sarah began her campaign. She started by publicly praising his unique perspective in meetings, but always in a way that subtly highlighted his lack of formal training. John has such an interesting way of looking at things. It's refreshing to get a perspective that's not clouded by traditional business school thinking. She began asking him technical questions in meetings, not to embarrass him, but to position herself as the expert who could help clarify complex concepts for him. Most devastatingly, she started copying senior management on emails where she sought his input on projects that were clearly above his expertise level. Within a month, John went from the office bully to someone desperately trying to prove he belonged. He stopped interrupting people. He stopped making jokes. He actually came to Sarah privately and apologized. She had flipped the script completely, and he never even realized he was being manipulated. This is the first lesson of Machiavellian revenge. Never attack directly. Always use your enemy's own psychological profile against them. Make them defeat themselves while you appear to be helping. But this is just the beginning. The real darkness comes in how you choose your battles and execute your long-term strategy. Comment below with psychology if you've ever noticed these patterns in someone who disrespected you. Understanding your enemy's psychology is the first step to defeating them. Chapter 2. The Art of Strategic Patience. Chapter 2. Strategic Patience. Why immediate revenge makes you look weak. In 1502, Machiavelli wrote about Cesare, Borgia's approach to dealing with a group of conspirators who had betrayed him. Instead of having them killed immediately, which everyone expected, Borgia invited them to a peace negotiation. He was charming, forgiving, even generous. Then months later, when they had completely let their guard down, he had them all eliminated in a single night. The message was clear. Betraying Cesare Borgia was a death sentence, even if it took time to arrive. This is the power of strategic patience, and it's probably the hardest lesson for modern people to learn because we live in an instant gratification society. Someone disrespects us and we want justice now. We want them to feel bad now. We want vindication now. But immediate revenge has 3 fatal flaws. 1, it's expected. Your enemy is prepared for retaliation and can defend against it. 2, it makes you look emotional and out of control. Even if you win the immediate battle, you lose respect. 3, it often escalates the situation, turning a single incident into ongoing warfare. Strategic patience flips all of these disadvantages into advantages. Let me tell you about Michael, a software developer who discovered his manager was taking credit for his work during executive presentations. Michael had spent months developing a revolutionary algorithm, and his manager was literally copy-pasting Michael's code while presenting it as his own innovation. Michael's first instinct was to immediately email the executives, expose the plagiarism, maybe even quit dramatically. Classic emotional response. Instead, we developed a strategic patience campaign that took 6 months to execute, but completely destroyed his manager's career while making Michael look like a model employee. Phase 1, Intelligence Gathering, Month 1. Michael started documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every meeting. But more importantly, he started studying his manager's patterns. When did he typically steal ideas? How did he present them? Who was he trying to impress? We discovered that his manager had a history of this behavior with multiple team members, and that he was desperately trying to secure a promotion to director level. Phase 2, the setup, months 2 to 3. Michael began sharing his most innovative ideas in group settings where multiple people could witness his contributions. He started using version control systems more meticulously, creating undeniable proof of his work's timeline. But here's the clever part. He also started deliberately creating flawed ideas that looked brilliant on the surface, but had fundamental problems that would only become apparent after implementation. Phase 3, the trap, months 4 to 5. Michael's manager predictably began stealing these flawed ideas. Michael would present a concept in a team meeting. His manager would take credit for it in executive presentations, and then Michael would watch as these ideas failed, spectacularly during implementation. Meanwhile, Michael was building relationships with the executives by offering genuine solutions to problems his manager's stolen, flawed ideas had created. Phase 4, the revelation, month 6. When his manager was finally up for promotion, Michael didn't expose him. Instead, he simply presented his portfolio of original work, complete with timestamps, version histories, and documented contributions during his own performance review. The executives weren't stupid. They could see the pattern. They could see that every successful innovation had come from Michael's documented work, while every failure had come from ideas the manager had claimed credit for. Michael got promoted to his manager's intended position. His manager was quietly transferred to a different department and never promoted again. Most importantly, Michael was seen as a collaborative, professional employee who had simply been doing excellent work, while his manager was seen as someone who couldn't be trusted. This is the power of strategic patience. Michael didn't destroy his manager in a moment of anger. He systematically built a case over months that made the manager's downfall inevitable and his own rise unstoppable. But patience alone isn't enough. You need to understand the second Machiavellian principle. Never attack directly when you can make your enemies destroy themselves. Because what I'm about to show you next is even darker. It's about turning your enemy's own weapons against them so effectively that they'll never even realize they're under attack until it's too late. Type patience in the comments if you've ever wanted immediate revenge but held back. That restraint is actually a sign of strategic intelligence. You're more Machiavellian than you think. Chapter 3. Indirect Warfare. Making Enemies Destroy Themselves. Chapter 3. Indirect Warfare. The Art of Making Your Enemies Destroy Themselves. Machiavelli once observed that the most effective way to defeat an enemy is not to attack them directly, but to create conditions where they attack themselves. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated level. Let me share a story that will show you exactly how this works. James was a talented architect at a prestigious firm. His colleague, David, was constantly undermining him in meetings, stealing his ideas, and spreading rumors about his work quality. David was popular, charismatic, and had been with the firm longer. When James tried to defend himself, he just looked paranoid and petty. Traditional advice would tell James to document everything, talk to HR, or confront David directly. All of these approaches would have failed because David held the social advantage. Instead, James learned to use David's own personality against him, and the results were devastating. First, James studied David's psychological profile. David was narcissistic and needed constant validation. David was competitive to the point of being self-destructive. David was insecure about his technical skills compared to younger architects. David craved recognition from the firm's senior partners. These weren't weaknesses. They were weapons waiting to be used. The bait phase. James started publicly praising David's work, but always in ways that subtly highlighted David's limitations. David has such a classic approach to design. It reminds me of the work we were doing 10 years ago, which has such timeless appeal. James began asking David for advice on cutting-edge techniques, knowing David would have to admit ignorance or fake expertise he didn't have. The competition phase. James started volunteering for high-profile projects and then publicly credited David as his inspiration, creating an expectation that David should be able to match or exceed James's work. When David inevitably tried to outdo James, he began making mistakes, taking on projects beyond his skill level, over-promising to clients, working himself to exhaustion trying to prove his superiority. The exposure phase. James didn't expose David's mistakes. He didn't need to. David's own need to compete and prove himself led to increasingly visible failures. When David's overambitious projects started failing, James was always there to offer help, making David look incompetent while James looked like a team player. Here's what was really happening. James had turned David's own aggression and insecurity into a self-destructive cycle. David went from being a confident bully to an anxious, mistake-prone employee desperately trying to prove himself. The beautiful part? David never realized he was being manipulated. He thought his problems were just bad luck or increased pressure at work. Within 8 months, David had been removed from 2 major projects due to poor performance. David's reputation with clients had deteriorated significantly. David was working 80-plus-hour weeks and making stress-induced mistakes. David had isolated himself from other colleagues through his increasingly erratic behavior. James, meanwhile, was seen as a supportive colleague who tried to help David through his difficult period. This is the darkest aspect of Machiavellian strategy. You can destroy someone's career, reputation, and mental health without ever directly attacking them. You simply create the conditions where their own psychological weaknesses do the work for you. Now, I need to address something important here. This level of psychological manipulation is incredibly powerful, and with power comes responsibility. David wasn't an innocent victim. He was a workplace bully who had made James's life miserable for years. But you need to ask yourself, does someone who disrespected you once deserve to have their life systematically destroyed? Machiavelli would say that mercy is often seen as weakness, and that allowing disrespect to go unpunished only invites more disrespect. But he would also say that a true prince knows when to use maximum force, and when restraint serves better, strategic purposes. If you're going to use indirect warfare, here are the key principles. 1. Study your enemy's psychology until you know them better than they know themselves. 2. Turn their strengths into weaknesses by creating situations where their natural responses work against them. 3. Never reveal your hand. The moment they realize they're under attack, they can defend themselves. 4. Always maintain plausible deniability. You should appear to be trying to help them even as you orchestrate their downfall. 5. Know when to stop. Completely destroying someone often creates more problems than it solves. But what if indirect warfare isn't enough? What if you're dealing with someone so persistent, so damaging, that subtle manipulation won't work? That's when Machiavelli taught the nuclear option, the strategic use of fear and reputation destruction. And that's what we're covering next. Comment indirect? If you've ever seen someone destroy themselves through their own behavior, sometimes the best strategy is just to get out of your enemy's way and let them do the damage themselves. Chapter 4. The Nuclear Option. Fear and Reputation. Chapter 4. The Nuclear Option. When you need to make someone fear ever crossing you again. In 1503, Cesare Borgia faced a problem. His enemies kept coming back. No matter how many times he defeated them, pardoned them, or tried to negotiate with them, they would regroup and attack again. So he decided to send a message that would end the cycle forever. He invited all his enemies to a New Year's celebration in the town of Senegalia. They came thinking it was a peace offering. By dawn, they were all dead. But here's the key detail. Borgia made sure everyone heard about it. He wanted the story to spread. The message was clear. Crossing Cesare, Borgia doesn't just have consequences, it has permanent consequences. This is what Machiavelli called the necessity of being feared. Sometimes, mercy and subtlety aren't enough. Sometimes, you need to make an example so powerful that it prevents all future disrespect. But in the modern world, you can't actually eliminate your enemies. So how do you create that same level of deterrent effect? You destroy their reputation so completely that crossing, you become social and professional suicide. What I'm about to teach you is the nuclear option of social warfare. It will end conflicts permanently, but it will also make you powerful enemies if used carelessly. Only use these techniques when someone has repeatedly disrespected you despite clear warnings. or when the disrespect is so severe that it threatens your livelihood or well-being. Let me tell you about Lisa, a corporate executive who discovered that her colleague, Mark, was not just undermining her in meetings, but was actively sabotaging her projects and spreading lies about her performance to senior management. This wasn't casual workplace politics. Mark was trying to destroy her career to advance his own. When Lisa tried to address it professionally, Mark escalated his attacks. When she documented everything and went to HR, Mark convinced them that Lisa was the problem. Lisa was facing career destruction, so she decided to use the nuclear option. Lisa spent 3 months gathering intelligence on Mark, not just about his work performance, but about his entire professional and personal history. She discovered Mark had embellished his resume in several places. Mark had been fired from a previous company for ethical violations, though this wasn't public knowledge. Mark was claiming credit for team successes while blaming others for failures. Mark was having an affair with a vendor, creating potential conflict of interest issues. Mark had been bad-mouthing the company's executives to subordinates. This wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern of unethical behavior that would concern any employer. Lisa didn't release all this information at once. That would have looked like a vendetta. Instead, she orchestrated a careful sequence of revelations that appeared to come from different sources. Week 1, an anonymous tip to HR about the vendor. Relationship reached the right person through carefully planned office gossip. Week 2, Mark's resume discrepancies were discovered during a routine background check for a promotion he was seeking. Week 3, a recording of Mark criticizing company leadership was accidentally forwarded to senior management by someone he had confided in. Week 4, former colleagues from Mark's previous company were coincidentally contacted by current employees who had been asked to verify references for team members. Here's what made this so devastating. Each revelation appeared to be unrelated to the others, and none could be traced back to Lisa. To outside observers, it looked like Mark was just having a run of bad luck, or that his unethical behavior was finally catching up with him. But to Mark, the message was clear. Someone had systematically investigated every aspect of his life and career, and could destroy him at will. Mark wasn't just fired, he was blacklisted. The story of his ethical violations spread through professional networks. His reputation was so damaged that he had to leave the industry entirely. But here's the key. Lisa appeared completely innocent throughout the entire process. She was seen as a professional who had unfortunately worked with someone of questionable character. Word spread through the company about what had happened to Mark. The story became legend. Don't mess with Lisa. Look what happened to the last guy who tried. Lisa never had to use these tactics again. Her reputation for being someone you didn't want to cross became her greatest protection. Now, was this ethical? Mark was genuinely unethical. Everything Lisa revealed was true. But the systematic way she destroyed his entire career and reputation, that's where we enter morally gray territory. Machiavelli would argue that Mark's own actions made his downfall inevitable, and that Lisa simply accelerated a process that would have happened anyway. He would also argue that by making an example of Mark, Lisa prevented him from destroying other people's careers in the future. If you're going to use the nuclear option, here are the essential principles. 1. Only use this against people who have repeatedly and severely crossed you, despite clear warnings. 2. Everything you reveal must be true and verifiable. The moment you lie or exaggerate, you become the villain. 3. Make it appear that their downfall is the natural consequence of their own actions, not your vendetta. 4. Never reveal your role. The fear comes from not knowing who has this power over them. 5. Make it swift and complete. Half measures just create enemies who know they're at war with you. This is the darkest level of Machiavellian strategy. It's not about winning an argument or getting an apology. It's about making someone's life so difficult that they never think about crossing you again and making sure everyone else knows what happens to people who do. Use this power wisely. Because once you become known as someone who can and will destroy careers, you change how everyone interacts with you forever. Type nuclear. If you've ever witnessed someone's reputation get completely destroyed, sometimes the fear of consequences is the only thing that stops toxic behavior. Chapter 5. The Long Game. Building Unassailable Power. Chapter 5. The Long Game. Building Power So Complete. That disrespect becomes impossible. Here's the ultimate truth that Machiavelli understood. The best way to handle disrespect is to make yourself so powerful that people wouldn't dare disrespect you in the first place. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about transformation. It's about becoming the kind of person who commands respect automatically, who operates from a position of such strength that challenging you would be strategic suicide for your enemies. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." The key to long-term power isn't just being strong, it's making sure everyone knows you're strong. And more importantly, making sure they understand the consequences of testing that strength. Let me tell you about Robert, a mid-level manager who came to me after years of being disrespected by colleagues, subordinates, and even his own boss. Robert was competent, hardworking, and knowledgeable, but he was seen as weak. And in corporate environments, weakness invites predators. After 2 years of implementing Machiavellian principles, Robert became the most feared and respected executive in his company. Here's how. Robert started by becoming genuinely indispensable. He didn't just do his job well, he became the person everyone needed to succeed. He mastered skills others avoided, took on projects others wouldn't touch, and built expertise that made him irreplaceable. But competence alone isn't enough. Plenty of competent people get walked over. You need strategic competence, competence that gives you leverage over others. Robert began systematically building intelligence networks. He cultivated relationships with people at every level of the company, from executives to maintenance staff. He made himself valuable to everyone, and in return, he learned everything. He knew who was sleeping with whom, who was stealing supplies, which projects were really succeeding, which executives were planning to leave, and which departments were about to get cut. Knowledge is power, but strategic knowledge is dominance. Robert began carefully demonstrating his capabilities. When a colleague tried to undermine him in a meeting, Robert casually mentioned a piece of information that made it clear he knew about the colleague's recent performance issues. When a subordinate tried to go around him to his boss, Robert made sure that subordinate's next project failed due to unforeseen complications that Robert could have prevented but chose not to. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were calculated demonstrations that crossing Robert had consequences. Robert made sure stories about his capabilities spread. When he helped someone, they heard about it. When he destroyed someone, they heard about that too. He cultivated a reputation as someone who could be your greatest ally or your worst nightmare, depending on how you treated him. The key was consistency. Every action reinforced the same message. Robert is not someone you want as an enemy. Over time, Robert systematically removed or neutralized every person who had ever disrespected him, not through emotional revenge, but through strategic maneuvering that made their positions untenable. The brilliant part, he often helped them find new positions elsewhere, positions that removed them from his sphere, while making him look magnanimous. By the end of 2 years, Robert's entire professional environment had changed. People spoke to him differently. They sought his approval, feared his disapproval, and never, ever tried to disrespect him. But here's the most important part. Robert wasn't feared because he was cruel or unpredictable. He was feared because he was strategic, competent, and absolutely unwilling to tolerate disrespect. 1. Become indispensable. Don't just be good at your job. Be the person others need to succeed. 2. Control information. Know everything about everyone in your sphere of influence. 3. Build strategic alliances. Cultivate relationships with people who can help you and hurt your enemies. 4. Demonstrate consequences. Make sure everyone knows that disrespecting you has costs. 5. Control your reputation. Actively manage how others perceive you and your capabilities. 6. Eliminate threats strategically. Remove people who can't learn to respect you, but do it in ways that benefit your reputation. The end game isn't to be loved or feared, it's to be respected. When you have true power, disrespect becomes not just unlikely, but unthinkable. People won't disrespect you because they've seen what happens to those who do. They won't challenge you because they understand you hold cards they can't see. They won't undermine you because they need your goodwill more than you need theirs. This is the final lesson of Machiavellian strategy. The best battle is the one you never have to fight because everyone already knows you would win. But remember, this kind of power comes with responsibility. When people fear your capabilities, they also watch your character. Use your power to protect yourself and advance worthy goals, not to become the kind of person you originally sought protection from. He cultivated a reputation as someone who could be your greatest ally or your worst nightmare, depending on how you treated him. The key was consistency. Every action reinforced the same message. Robert is not someone you want as an enemy. Over time, Robert systematically removed or neutralized every person who had ever disrespected him, not through emotional revenge, but through strategic maneuvering that made their positions untenable. The brilliant part, he often helped them find new positions elsewhere, positions that removed them from his sphere, while making him look magnanimous. By the end of 2 years, Robert's entire professional environment had changed. People spoke to him differently. They sought his approval, feared his disapproval, and never, ever tried to disrespect him. But here's the most important part. Robert wasn't feared because he was cruel or unpredictable. He was feared because he was strategic, competent, and absolutely unwilling to tolerate disrespect. 1. Become indispensable. Don't just be good at your job. Be the person others need to succeed. 2. Control information. Know everything about everyone in your sphere of influence. 3. Build strategic alliances. Cultivate relationships with people who can help you and hurt your enemies. 4. Demonstrate consequences. Make sure everyone knows that disrespecting you has costs. 5. Control your reputation. Actively manage how others perceive you and your capabilities. 6. Eliminate threats strategically. Remove people who can't learn to respect you, but do it in ways that benefit your reputation. The end game isn't to be loved or feared, it's to be respected. When you have true power, disrespect becomes not just unlikely, but unthinkable. People won't disrespect you because they've seen what happens to those who do. They won't challenge you because they understand you hold cards they can't see. They won't undermine you because they need your goodwill more than you need theirs. This is the final lesson of Machiavellian strategy. The best battle is the one you never have to fight because everyone already knows you would win. But remember, this kind of power comes with responsibility. When people fear your capabilities, they also watch your character. Use your power to protect yourself and advance worthy goals, not to become the kind of person you originally sought protection from. Let me end with a warning that Machiavelli himself would have given you. These strategies work. They work incredibly well. They can transform your life, your career, and how people treat you. But they also change who you are. When you start thinking strategically about human relationships, when you begin seeing people's psychological weaknesses as weapons to be used, when you develop the ability to systematically destroy someone's reputation and career, you become a different kind of person. With this knowledge comes a choice. You can use these tools to protect yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, to prevent others from walking over you. That's justice. Or you can use them to dominate others, to settle minor scores, to feel powerful at the expense of people who meant you no real harm. That's tyranny. Machiavelli understood this distinction. He wrote The Prince not to create monsters, but to teach good people how to survive in a world that contains monsters. I've taught these strategies to hundreds of people over the years. Some use them to escape toxic relationships, to advance their careers, to protect their families. They became stronger, more confident, more respected. Others became obsessed with power, alienated their friends, and turned into the kind of people they originally sought protection from. The difference wasn't in the strategies they learned. It was in why they chose to use them. So here's my challenge to you. Before you use any of these techniques, ask yourself this question. Am I doing this to protect myself and advance justice? Or am I doing this to feel powerful and get revenge? If the answer is the latter, these strategies will ultimately destroy you along with your enemies. But if you're genuinely seeking to protect yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, to create a life where people think twice before they dare to disrespect you, then you now have the tools to do exactly that. If this video has changed how you think about power and respect, hit that like button and subscribe for more content about the psychology of influence and strategic thinking. Comment below with Prince if you're ready to start demanding the respect you deserve. But comment power if you understand the responsibility that comes with these capabilities. And remember, the goal isn't to become someone people fear. The goal is to become someone people respect so much that the thought of disrespecting you never even occurs to them. Machiavelli once wrote that fortune favors the bold, but wisdom protects the bold from their own success. Use these tools wisely. The world has enough tyrants. What it needs are more people who understand power well enough to use it justly. Until next time, stay strategic.